Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Lynette, for your beautiful prayer. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see all of you here. I'm very grateful for all of the hearts and minds in this room. We're facing some very daunting stuff here in New Mexico, as well as across the country. And our greatest hope is really each other. I've learned so much from these incredible panelists here. We want to give them as much time as possible. They have such a wealth of knowledge. My name is Asha Canalos. This is Miya Rommwatt and Delaney Pearson's here, and we are New Mexico Story Power. You can check us out at newmexicostorypower.com. We do interviews of people who are fighting on the front lines on the oil and gas and extraction in general in the state of New Mexico. We're very honored to have all of you here. And first, we're just going to let people talk a little bit about their work, what organizations they work for, if that applies. And I want to let you know that the index cards that are on the chairs and the pencils are for folks to write down any questions that you might have as the panel is progressing. We're going to do a short Q&A at the end of this panel, and we'll be reading we'll try to get to as many questions as we can in the time that we have. So again, feel free to write your questions, and if you like, write down your contact information if you'd like to be on any of our mailing lists. Thank you. So I'm going to begin today. Oh yeah, we have also, Maya's going to make an announcement about the live streaming.
So just a quick thing, Carolyn, maybe she'll raise her hand if she wants, but Carolyn is live streaming this event on Facebook, and if you would like to share it or like it and share it, that would be great. You can find it at our Facebook page, which is Keep It in the Ground, New Mexico. So it's live streaming now, and then it'll be up for a little bit, but we're going to like it, and then it should be on our page, and you can like it as well and share it. And thanks to Carolyn for that.
Okay, great. Eleanor Bravo is from Food and Water Watch. Thank you, Eleanor. Is this on?
I'm Eleanor Bravo and Food and Water Watch. I want to thank the Santa Fe Art Institute and New Mexico Story Power for hosting us. It's really an honor to be here. I am the Southwest Director of Food and Water Watch, and I'm also heading up a national campaign to oppose pipelines. So I do work here in New Mexico, but I do travel all over the United States. Food and Water Watch is an international organization. We work primarily in the U.S. We work in Europe and South and Central America. But I'm an immigrant. I was born in the Philippines. I make New Mexico my home now, and I've been here for over 30 years. I grew up on the East Coast, and I come to this work out of many reasons. I started out working for Obama in 2008. We ran the #1 field office for Obama in the country in Rio Rancho. I don't know whether you know that or not. But at this point, we are working now more than ever. So I am personally someone who was born with the justice gene. And I do this work for the love of it, and it is gratifying. Food and Water Watch is a wonderful organization. We were the lead organization that banned fracking in the state of New York 2 years ago. 2 months ago. 2 months ago, we banned fracking in the state of Maryland. And we also have a ban on fracking in Vermont. So we're very proud of our work. We work long term. The campaign in New York was 9 years. The campaign in Maryland was 7 years. We have introduced a ban on fracking here in New Mexico, but because of the political climate and the lack of political will here in New Mexico, it didn't go anywhere, but we are not deterred. And I think what I would like you to know about Food and Water Watch is that we're member-driven, and if you join with us, we will do your bidding. And we are an organization that has dug in our heels. We were the first organization that wanted a ban on fracking, that we did not believe that it could ever be regulated. And now we have been joined by dozens of other organizations who believe that same thing. Now, 10 years after we started our work on fracking, now we have a lot more literature, a lot more science behind us to know that fracking cannot be regulated safely. We have been working here in the state. We also have been working throughout the rest of the country against fracking, and we are working also grassroots and assisting all kinds of communities in all different ways that we can. So, Food and Water Watch, our mission statement is that we work for a democracy that provides people with the opportunity to have clean water and safe food. These are basic human rights. These are the commons. No one should be making a profit off of water and food. These are our rights, and we deserve a government that provides us with those basic human rights. So we will have lots of other opportunities to talk about more things tonight, but I want to thank you so much, and I will pass it on to Miya.
Miya King-Flaherty.
Thank you so much.
Well, my name is Miya King-Flaherty, and I am the Public Lands Fellow for the Sierra Club Rio Grande Chapter in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm actually quite new to activism, and I've been doing this for about a year and 4 months, and I campaign and organize around issues of oil and gas development, mainly fracking in the greater Chaco area. And I work very closely with our next guest, Daniel Tso. But I also am working to do a health impact assessment on the impacts of fracking in these communities who are having to deal day in and day out with the everyday realities of being maybe 300 feet from a fracking derrick, or having to be bothered 24 hours a day with the flaring and the venting. I think it's really important to be able to document some of these things that are happening, and we're hoping to use this as a tool as well, an educational tool. The Bureau of Land Management manages most of the lands, public lands in northern New Mexico. And by being able to document this, we're hoping that we can kind of inform some of the policies and use this in multiple ways. And I also try to create and bring a lot of awareness into Albuquerque about what's going on in the Four Corners, fracking in northern New Mexico. A lot of people don't know this. And yeah, I think it's really important to also work with communities, to listen, to be very sensitive and aware, because at every step of activism, it's really important to incorporate these concerns to be able to accomplish anything.
Daniel Tso Aro namis as tachi basischi Christni the sechido now ban the summer. But the net stage. I served on the Navajo Nation Council from '86 to 1995. During my tenure, we reformed the Navajo Nation government. And some of my colleagues, Daniel Tso can just sit still, but he'll still raise dust. So that particular description still holds true today. In 2013, there's a group of young ladies that wanted to initiate a walk from to Gentilli, to Mount Taylor, to Mount Humphreys, on to Mount Hesperus, and back up to Mount Blanca. And they invited me to speak, and I told them, hey, it's like we're at the edge of the Pacific Ocean. As Navajo people were there to put pollen and place prayers on the deep water. As we're doing that, somebody within our group sees a tsunami coming. We have no time to run. We have no shelter to take cover in. This is what we're facing. And it's exactly what it is right now. So, that's what drives me. That's what drives me. Lynette did a beautiful prayer acknowledging the young ones, the unborn. That's who we're doing it for. That's the extent of my work.
Hi everybody, my name is Mariel Nanasi, and I see some friends, so thanks for being here. Thanks to SFAI. I used to be on the board of SFAI, and so it's really nice to come back here and to be talking about this. SFAI has a history, or herstory, of taking on tough issues. So I wanna really congratulate you and the storytellers for doing that, because that's what these times are calling for. So just a little bit about me and how I've come to do the work and what I'm doing. I'm the executive director of New Energy Economy in Santa Fe. And about 9 years ago now, I went to a Pioneers conference. And I knew about climate change, but I didn't understand the urgency of it. And when I was listening, like you're listening right now, I was very moved. And you could listen and you could leave and basically do nothing. And just say that you came here. And I thought, how am I going to look at my children in their eyes and say that I knew something, but I didn't act, and that I didn't use my talents in whatever way, which I had no idea at that time what I was embarking upon. And so I went and I started to volunteer at New Energy Economy, the place now that I am the executive director of. And then I asked for a job. I have been a civil rights lawyer in the past, and so the then boss said, well, I'm not going to pay you a lawyer's salary. And I said, oh, I know. I just want to work and I want to learn. And when I found out that when we turn on this microphone or the computer, 60% of our energy today comes from coal. And 20% comes from nuclear. And about 10% comes from gas. 2% comes from solar. One of that percent, one of the two, are all the people who have solar on their houses and businesses like I do. And then the other percent is what PNM has put on the utility scale solar, that's what they call it. And then about 7% wind. And I thought, well, all I have to do is go out and talk to people and say, what are we doing burning coal when we have the sun Zia on our flag? When you know, today's kind of a rare day. And even when it snowed and when it rained, we still saw the sun today. And just like peeking out every little bit. Because we live in New Mexico, and the sun, you know, if there's one thing, we know what the sun feels like here. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just go to P&M and say, this is a crazy idea. Why are you burning coal? And let's just have solar and basically flip that whole energy paradigm. Well, this year, about a month ago, P&M has finally announced that it will be closing the San Juan Generating Station. It's one of the dirtiest and largest, not the largest, but it's one of the largest. It's the 18th dirtiest coal plant in the entire country. And just so you have an idea, there's $60 million every year of externalized healthcare costs. And that's mostly in asthma and lung disease and heart disease. And who bears the brunt of that? The people who live under the toxic shadow of not only that coal plant, but the other coal plants in the area, and those are the native people who live on Navajo Nation. So it's an amazing honor to have a dream, and I encourage you all to dream very big, especially in these very sorrowful times. But not only dream, that you have to act, and that you have to turn your despair into activism, because activism is the antidote to despair. And so it's an honor to have dreamed this dream of closing down San Juan Generating Station. There's so many more. Four Corners Coal Plant, Navajo Generating Station, lots of coal on or adjacent to Navajo Nation. It's called an energy sacrifice zone. So we consume the energy in Santa Fe, and the people on Navajo Nation pay with their lives for our energy consumption. Yet we have some of the cleanest air in Santa Fe. So now that we're on this precipice and we've come to this plateau, if you will, of knowing that there's going to be the closure of these coal plants. So what's next? So of course one of those things is we must protect the workers and the miners, because oftentimes when a Peabody or an Arch closes, what happens, or goes bankrupt, the executives have golden parachutes, and to be perfectly honest, the environment and the workers get fucked. And so we can't allow that to happen. That's number one. Number two is we have to have meaningful cleanup, really meaningful cleanup. Right now there's something called coal ash, and that's when you burn the coal, there's ash, over 1.5 million tons. 1.5 million tons of coal ash is burned every year at that plant. And it is leaking, it is seeping, it is leaching into the groundwater and into the ground. We need real cleanup. And then what we need is a just transition for those workers, and we can talk about that later. What does that mean? And we need 100% renewable energy. And tomorrow we'll be launching, and I invite you all to come to 100% renewable launch campaign. And you know, some people say, 100%, Mariel, how can we do that? And so when we know that men abuse women, we don't say 50% of men should stop beating women. We say end domestic violence, right? Yeah. So we need 100% renewable in New Mexico. We are an energy producing and energy exporting state. And if we make that claim and set that goal and dream big, all of us, just even all the people in this room, we can get there. Thank you.
It's hard to follow 100% renewable energy campaign. Good evening. My name is Rebecca Sobel. I'm the Senior Climate and Energy Campaigner for Wild Earth Guardians. And Wild Earth Guardians is based here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We were started in 1989, and we have 4 major programs. We work to protect and preserve the wildness of wildlife, wild places, wild rivers, and a climate and energy program across the American West. We also have offices in Denver and Missoula and Tucson as well. So I like to say that I came to this work because I grew up on the East Coast originally, and as soon as I could, I got out of there and came to New Mexico, and I've been here since. But I learned really early on that the pursuit of social justice was either a luxury or a necessity. And once I found out that climate change existed, I had the luxury of being able to work on it. When we started in 2005, we were talking about 10 years left to avert the worst in catastrophic warming. So now in 2017, we're at 409 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere when the safe level of carbon is 350 parts per million. And I learned, I believe that if there's one penultimate social justice issue, it is climate change, because regardless of social class, we all live on the same planet, we're all affected by the same ecosystem. And in our climate and energy program, we primarily work to do two things. We work to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and we work to promote just transitions. And those are both really loaded terms, and they have multiple facets and levels of engagement. We engage legally. We have a legal team, and we do file cases. We engage in cold scientific data, and we also organize. And I want to thank you all for being here, but I also want to say I'm filled with this tremendous love because I have never before been on a panel of people that I get to say I truly love. What's really lucky about all of us is that we do work really closely in coalition. I've been working to help convene some of those coalition meetings over the past almost 3 years, informally, and what I think is a growing, hopefully model, diverse coalition of impacted frontline community members, supportive allies, and activists that want to engage. And so tonight, I think you're going to hear the culmination of, not the culmination, but the continued process of a lot of our collective work together. And I hope by the end of the evening, our coalition is that much stronger with each one of you in it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Eisenfeld. I live in Farmington, up in the San Juan County, where oil and gas drilling, uranium, coal have been around for probably the past 80, 90 years. I think the first oil wells in San Juan County were 1907, and we have the coal-fired power plants were built in 1962, 1972, were the building blocks for Southern California, Phoenix, Las Vegas, the uranium that was utilized in the Cold War, Manhattan Project. Some things that, those of us who are, I'm 54 years old, and so, kind of, what are the things that we can do to affect where we live. So I work for the San Juan Citizens Alliance. We're an organization that's been in Durango and Farmington area since 1987, and I am the only employee of San Juan Citizens Alliance who works in New Mexico, in Farmington. I think I'm the only person who works full-time for an environmental organization in Farmington. So, I mean, maybe there's some responsibility with that. But I work mainly on five different things: oil and gas, coal, air quality, public lands, and uranium. And there's a lot of interchange between those topics. The other thing that I'm very interested in, and something that's become more and more prominent, is the energy-water nexus. I don't think that a lot of people know that over 66% of the surface water in New Mexico flows through Farmington, and a lot of it is used by the oil and gas industry, the coal industry, and the uranium industry. And of course, our neck of the woods hit the international news with the Animas River spill, the Gold King spill, where our river turned orange. And I was at a presentation last night by the EPA where basically they identified that there are 47 mines up in Silverton, all connected by tunnels with backed up water. And that orange, that color is just the start of it. And then you work your way down into the San Juan River through New Mexico, and you get the coal plants that are using enormous amounts of water, dumping coal ash into the San Juan River. And then you get the uranium mining tailing sites in Shiprock, which are completely leaking into the river. And so it's sort of a connect the dots deal. But I've worked for San Juan Citizens Alliance for 10 years, and when I first started, it was working to fight new coal plants. We had the proposed Desert Rock coal plant, which, you know, the proponents of it were telling us that our air quality would be better with a third coal plant, and told us that it's a done deal. And that's where I started getting kind of fired up with my job is environmental protection, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, National Environmental Policy Act, Endangered Species Act. These are things that, these are laws that came in the late 60s, early 70s, so they're the heart of our democracy, in my opinion. Really important stuff that the Trump administration cannot just snap their fingers in executive order, and it's really important that people protect that. I got sort of involved in the Chaco area drilling and oil and gas wells because two people came into my office in Farmington in like 2007. They were concerned about the possible paving of County Road 7950, the main road out to the Chaco Park. And they were concerned that there was going to be energy development off it. And so Tom Udall at the time had given, had made sure that there was like $1 million in federal money that went to look at the possibility of improvements to that road. And they were going to do, under the National Environmental Policy Act, a environmental assessment. And so we dogged them sort of every step of the way. The environmental assessment never got finished, never answered our questions. But again, you know, a perfect example of kind of, you know, what are these projects for, and then kind of the importance of watchdogs. And then, and all the work that I've kind of been doing, I think that, you know, one of the most fascinating things is we went from, you know, the new coal plants, fighting that, to fighting the existing coal plants. Then there was this sort of idea that natural gas is a bridge or transition fuel. Like, natural gas is not clean energy. And so when you have 40,000 oil and gas wells in San Juan County, and you walk out of your house and you walk in any direction 1,000 feet, you run into a well pad, you start learning real quick what it means to be in an industrialized zone. And so I'm a real advocate for transitioning us to renewable energy. I think we've got a great opportunity right now, thanks to the work that a lot of the folks here I've had the honor of working with. And so whether it's, you know, it needs to be sort of looked at holistically. And so anyway, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone, for your words. I also want to acknowledge that that we had another panelist who was going to be here, Kendra Pinto, but unfortunately she has an illness in the family, so we are sending her our best and our prayers for her. So I'm going to begin with our first question, and many people were motivated and impassioned by the incredible resistance at Standing Rock. And many people traveled from great distances to be there. At the same time, here in New Mexico, there are pipelines and extraction projects in almost every county, and as there are in every state in the U.S. And I want to thank Tom for presenting that map, which I think gives us a very good physical understanding and geographical basis for this conversation. It's going to be a great tool for people to use. So the question is, what would you say is our responsibility as activists in opposition to extraction to place to local peoples and cultures here in New Mexico? Daniel, would you like to start this one?
Thank you. Basically, I think we have a responsibility to ourselves so that we can have clean water, clean air, safe environment, but I also know we have a responsibility to our children, to our grandchildren, and to the great-grandchildren, and to the unborn, and even to the other species that inhabit Mother Earth, as well as And basically, that's a continuing question that comes up at the chapter house meetings. People ask each other, what are you going to tell your grandkids? When they ask you, how come you didn't stop it? How come you didn't say anything on our behalf? So it is a continuing question. And that's basically the part that I think is Navajo society we have to answer. And right now it's our Navajo Nation government won't even face that issue. The other aspect is the fact that we have a history that's shown through the Chaco Monument and all the sacred spaces that exist within all of New Mexico, in all of North America. I think within the law it's called heritage. And that's the responsibility we have. That's an heirloom that we need to pass on to the future generations.
Thank you. Mariel, would you like to speak to that?
I think that courage is an atrophied muscle. And we don't teach it. And our people are suffering because of it. You know, what do we really want? There's a beautiful, after this, I hope that video back there will be turned on. I mean, what do we really want? We want to belong to each other. We want, just like Daniel said, to eat together and sing and dance, even though I'm terrible at both of those. But we want to be together and belong to each other. And yet thank you so much, we've filled ourselves up with materialism that leaves us empty, and a materialism and a militarism, right? There's a war going on this earth by the fossil fuel companies and by the US military, but we allow it all over the world to feed that materialism that we keep on thinking that's gonna make us feel good. And I have to just tell you, I succumb to those things too. It's not like I'm immune from it. But our response, I think one of the issues is that our response is too often on an individual level. It's like, oh, well, I'll do a little less of something, or I'll buy, an electric car, or I'll have solar, or I'll do this. And those things are good. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I do some of those things. But we need collective action. We need resistance. You just can't get away from that. We need each other, and it's hard to organize. I think it's the hardest job there is, and we need to speak truth to power. And so courage is like having the hard conversations when you say a racist thing and you're like, shit, what did I do that for? And we're just like in the society, and then you have to apologize, you know what I mean? And then you work with the person, and you work through stuff, and you build power. That's hard, that's really hard. And you speak truth to power. So again, it's like knowing what needs to be said and working those things out. Even if you don't, you work them out with the people you love and trust and respect and who are on the ground and are suffering. And then you create spaces for them. You force sometimes space for them. That's our job, especially for people who are more privileged and who have access. So like, I will just tell you that this week I've been literally in the room with P&M for 8 hours every single day this week. That is a very difficult position, and I'm tired right now. But I came here because you feed me. Because then I realize why I'm doing this, And do I always feel courageous? No way. Am I sweating right now? I am. Are you gonna think I make sense or matter or whatever? We have to act as if sometimes. We have to take a leap. That's the only way that we're going to make a difference. If we do that, if we stand up, it started out. We have to stand up. I think one of the things is we're very lucky in New Mexico because we're so close to power, especially in Santa Fe. And so we have to push even on people who are good to we think of as good, like the Peter Wirths of the world, and we have to push them because they are only going to be as good as we make them. And so I'll just tell you, there's one last story. It's this isn't this time, but one other time when I was negotiating with P&M, and they said, oh, we're going to close down 2 of the coal units at San Juan, and what are we going to replace it with? Coal and nuclear. And there was a whole big long table, but if these 2 were together, all men, I was the only woman, and I just stood up and I looked at the senior vice president of P&M, and I just said, what about the children? And I started to cry. And all these men are like, holy shit. And it's sometimes you just have to say the truth. I just want to add anecdotally. So they call New Mexico, with the question in terms of what's our responsibility specifically as Northern New Mexicans. And they call New Mexico a cultural mosaic and not a melting pot, specifically. I can tell you, so I've worked for some big national green groups, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, etc. And they've got these models, these field models where you can dispatch, or back in the day, the old rule, you dispatch organizers to different states and they run a campaign to stop fracking or to protect water or whatever. We call these cookie cutter campaigns. And there's a rule out of the big greens, but there's 2 states that parachuting in and doing these cookie cutter campaigns don't work. And the first one's Alaska, and the second one is New Mexico. And so I say that because we have a very rich cultural history and tapestry in New Mexico, and we're the 5th largest geographic state. We only have 2 million people, and half of that population is around Albuquerque. Like Mariel mentioned, we have very close access to power. We are resource rich and population poor. That also means we have a stronger responsibility to each other. We have more land and we have less people. We know each other. We've got these communities that exist for generations. So I think specifically our responsibility is to start within our own community, to recognize where we have our own power, and then to be respectful and acknowledge those working in other communities, and to find opportunities to work together, not always on the same thing, but supportive of each other for knowing what they want. I mean, they call us the Wild West, right? Because you can come out here and you can just do whatever you want, everyone's gonna leave you alone. Well, fossil fuel companies think the same thing. But as Mariel mentioned also, we've got the cleanest air, and some of the cleanest air in the country here in Santa Fe, and our friends in Four Corners are living under the nation's largest methane cloud, with some of the worst air quality pollution in the country. Because Santa Fe is the seat of state power, we have privilege, access, and responsibility to lobby our leaders here on behalf of our brothers and sisters in the rest of the state and the country.
91% of all public lands in northwestern New Mexico is currently leased for oil and gas, with over 40,000 wells. This figure doesn't even take into account the 843 acres in the greater Chaco area that were auctioned in January of this year, which will allow another 400 sites. Can you describe the policy changes that recently unfolded around the greater Chaco area and your role in engaging with that policy? I'd like to start with you, Maya.
So I'd like to start by saying that the BLM has leased. They've approved about 400 wells already, and that doesn't even include the lands that were just recently auctioned off on January 25th. So that would allow for so many more wells than the 400 that have been approved already. But we are starting to see kind of a shift in the Bureau of Land Management. Some of the staff have become a little bit more receptive to what the community are saying. I talked a little bit about the noise and the light pollution. And on January 24th, we actually had a rally at the BLM state offices in Santa Fe. And just before that rally took place, Amy Hooters, she's the state director, did meet with a few community members, Navajo Chapter presidents as well. Daniel Tso was in that meeting, Kendra Pinto. And that was an opportunity for them to actually voice and talk about some of the concerns. And even though they did go forward with that lease sale, there were conditions of approval that were applied. It was an unprecedented thing. And basically what that means is before oil and gas companies can actually operate on these parcels, they do have to put mitigations in place that address some of the light pollution and the noise and some of the destruction of the roads. So we're kind of starting to see a shift, and it's really important, certainly during this administration when we feel like we're not being heard. Some of the BLM Farmington Field Office staff as well are opening their ears a little bit more, and they're starting to attend some of the community meetings, and so we're seeing maybe a little bit more tribal consultation, but also others here can speak a little bit more about that.
So northwestern New Mexico has a lot of federal land, our public land, tribal land, state land, and in 2003, Miya brought up the Bureau of Land Management, which is a part of the Department of the Interior. They're the ones that do what are known as resource management plans, and they did one for our region in 2003. And this resource management plan is supposed to look at the whole landscape and look at recreation opportunities, look at where they might want to lease for oil and gas, coal, grazing, a whole litany of what's known as multiple use, and that's another law, the Federal Land Policy Management Act of 1976, and so they're supposed to manage our public lands in a way that is for sustained yield and for preserving the landscape, and meanwhile the federal lands up in the northwest part of the state, 90% had already been leased for oil and gas, and the one area that had not been leased for oil and gas was down in the southern San Juan Basin, the area Light Rook, where Chaco Cultural National Historical Park is, and then when you look at the landscape that we also have. We're one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Chaco Culture, and it's Chaco Park, Aztec ruins, 39 outliers, and they're finding all these amazing roads that connect things, and there's sensitive places everywhere, and the BLM conducts these meetings and says to groups like mine, well, what's so compelling about anything out there? And then the BLM, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and other of these agencies, they're in partnership with these oil and gas companies once they lease things. It's not really objective when they do an analysis because they get royalties and revenue. And so the San Juan Basin dumped $4 billion in our heyday during our boom, $4 billion to Santa Fe and to Washington, D.C. And then when they started drilling down in what we call the Greater Chaco area, we immediately said, hey, you have no plan. You have no plan. And so it went from a few exploratory wells to, there's a big distinction between exploration and development. After about 10 or 12 successful new wells, they're utilizing new technology now because it used to be they just drilled everything vertically, and then they started going, oh, now we can drill directionally 2 miles. And in my mind, if you can drill 2 miles, you really need to reduce your conflicts on the surface. And so all of a sudden, the next thing we knew, there were 400 wells that they had approved with no plan. And again, they had never identified this area for oil and gas drilling. So in 2014, the Bureau of Land Management and government said, we're going to do a resource management plan amendment, environmental impact statement. Environmental impact statement, look at the impacts, look at alternatives, look at ways to plan better. And so here we are in 2017, and there's no resource management plan, and they've allowed these companies like WP Axon and Canna, these big companies, to just run over our communities. And the money is not coming back to the communities. And so to me, it's like this sort of constant disturbance. The policy stuff that I see is that a lot of us worked during the Energy Policy Act of 2005, during kind of the Bush-Cheney years, where they were approving individual well pads in Farmington, thousands of them per year, and saying there's no impact from these wells. But collectively, there's an enormous impact. It's industrialization of the landscape. And so then for us, we kind of were like, hey, people are going to be outraged about impacts of Chaco. I mean, this is not, a sacred place, something that's really special, a World Heritage Site. And even some of the archaeologists that we work with were kind of like, oh, well, I do work with industry, so I don't want to get cross with them. And I think going back to what Mariel said, it's like, what are we going to stand up for? Are we going to have 100% leasing? And it's starting to move down towards Albuquerque. We get involved with lease sales. We challenge individual projects. We're litigants on a number of lawsuits. But lawsuits take time, money, and we don't always know we're going to win. We might not win, but it's like this perseverance. And so anyway, I just think that the oil and gas industry, policy-wise, they want everything, And you listen to entities like the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and in my mind, those people are evil. And so we fight them, and that's sort of, I think, an important policy role for us. And then I would also say something that's happening that is really kind of remarkable is that our communities keep waiting for this idea that the boom's coming again, and that all of these regulations are onerous. And once we get rid of the regulations, and Farmington's a boom and bust. And we're in a bust right now, and coal's in a bust. And I think that those are market conditions that are policy factors that are going to resonate for a while. So we better start thinking on our feet. And those are the policies that I'm most interested in.
I want to also add my work. Basically, what culminated in the January 25 oil lease sale, it basically, through the Tri-Chapter Alliance, we were faced with it in October of 2014, and we had the BLM Farmington Field Office manager and lease specialist there at Ojo Encina. And we all basically opposed, at the time, the lease sale was going to be over 5,000 acres. And we objected to it, and right at that meeting, Victoria Barr announced it. She postponed it till January of 2015. When January 2015 came, we again opposed it, voiced opposition. That particular lease sale was postponed to October of 2014. And we kept doing it and kept doing it. The 5,000 acres finally was reduced to the 844 acres. So that part about the opposition, the National Historic Preservation Act, as well as the National Environmental Policy Act, and of which the Section 6 talks about tribal consultation. And we've stood on that aspect of federal law for since then, and our basic opposition is the fact that in the process of the 2003 Resource Management Plan, they sent out a Dear Tribal Leader form letter to a post office box at the 19 Pueblos, at the 31 chapters of the Eastern Navajo Agency. And we objected that that's not tribal consultation.
Yeah.
Our Pueblo historic preservation officers basically says tribal consultation is you come to our Pueblo with a blank sheet of paper, and then that's where tribal consultation starts. So that's the basic position that we've pushed hard on, and the result is there was 10 scoping meetings. We've basically kept harping on the Bureau of Indian Affairs has trust responsibility to the individual Navajo, to the Navajo Nation as a whole, to the individual heirs of the Navajo allotments, but they're hiding in the shadows. They don't come into the meetings. And we finally got that process, and we're supposed to again face them on May 8th through a public hearing that is going to be conducted by the Navigia Committee of the Navajo Nation Councilors at Council in New Mexico.
Thank you.
Let me just add to what's been said in terms of what's changed in the Chaco politics. Mariel mentioned energy sacrifice zone. So in 1968, President Nixon officially declared the Navajo Nation an energy sacrifice zone. And there have been tremendous efforts to disenfranchise those communities. As Mike mentioned, we call the area a checkerboard. So it is a mix of state, federal, Navajo Nation Indian Trust, and Navajo allotment landowners, as well as private. So if you are like Daniel, an allotment landowner, and own the land and the minerals of your land, and split estate sometimes too, you often have to go to 8 different agencies to figure out who's responsible and what's going on your land. So in 2003, when this resource management plan was made, BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, who is the organization charged with administering and managing the checkerboard of lands, they said, fracking, what we're calling this combination of directional drilling, horizontal drilling, is not technologically viable or economically feasible. So now, when they hit 100 wells, we sued them, and now we're at 367 and counting approved wells. What's changed? I think everybody here has helped change the dynamics. So in 2014, the fact that we're even in a process to review that outdated plan is progress. The Farmington Field Office of the BLM is known to be a rogue agency. Mike mentioned New Mexico Oil Conservation Division, Oil and Gas Association. A gentleman by the name of Steve Henke used to be the president of that association, and then also the manager of Farmington Field Office, BLM. So we have a rogue agency that's been in the back pocket of industry forever. What's changed is because we've developed a tremendous amount of public pressure and a very diverse campaign that is calling on Senator Udall, calling on our New Mexico delegation, engaging the New Mexico legislative body in protection efforts. I think this is absolutely worth mentioning. Navajo Nation in April formally requested a moratorium on fracking in the greater Chaco area until this plan is completed. So this plan, this new 2003 amendment plan that had 10 public meetings because we demanded them, that are at chapter houses, we've got 15 chapter resolutions and counting in support of curbing fracking development in this area, which in and of itself is something to be celebrated. We are continuing to push for more transparency. We can get to that in some other questions, but what's changed is all Pueblo Council, as well as Navajo Nation, as well as the New Mexico Legislature, the House, have all stood in formal support of greater Chaco protection, and that's only because of the movement and effort that this room is supporting.
Eleanor, I'm going to direct this question to you. Many of us have been to Chaco and to the Four Corners area and have seen the visible signs of fracking in oil and gas development, physical reminders of what we're dealing with. What's happening in Chaco is devastating, particularly to local communities on the ground living there with this. But the threats are in no way limited to Chaco Canyon. They're growing and they're spreading. For this reason, among many others, it's imperative that people work together to fight encroachment on the state as a whole. Can you talk a little bit about the threats that many of us face in New Mexico that maybe we don't know about and that we would consider in our backyard? For instance, here in Santa Fe or in Albuquerque.
Well, I live in Sandoval County, and we live in Corrales, which is a community that lives on domestic water wells. And in fact, in the state of New Mexico, we all get our drinking water. 85% of our drinking water is from groundwater. So about 2 years ago, a year and a half, a company, an almost bankrupt company, came from Oklahoma. That's that state that has all those earthquakes now, you know, more than California. They came to Sandoval County. AMREP pretty much gave them 4 half-acre lots that had already been platted for residential use, and pretty much said, here, why don't you guys just drill a well here, 6 miles from a municipal water source. Well, I broke in, this is 5 miles from my house. And here I am working all over the country, helping other people fight fracking. And I broke out in a cold sweat. And then I called my supervisor and said, guess what? And I said, I'm dropping everything. And we started an all-out campaign, and a lot of these folks here were right shoulder to shoulder with me. Mariel came down and testified. We started a huge grassroots campaign. We used a wonderful model, the same model we used in New York State, the same model we used in Maryland, grassroots. And I want to borrow from our executive director who says, we are not going to shop ourselves out of this dilemma. We all came here in cars. We all use fossil fuels. This is not going to be the solution. The solution is to bring about political will to get off of fossil fuels, keep it in the ground. And we have started a campaign for 100% renewables by 2035 because we know 2050 is not going to accomplish what we really need to do. So Sandoval County is a big county. You saw from the map that it goes up to Counselor. And it's the size of Connecticut, but here it is coming to residential areas. So, you know, we could kind of turn our backs a little bit when drilling was going on in these 2 very concentrated areas of New Mexico. But they're running out. Fracking gets the dregs. And the industry knows that we are going to be transitioning to renewables pretty quickly. And so they are in a big rush to scour every ounce of oil and natural gas out and pipe it to Mexico and sell it to China. And that's exactly what's going on all throughout the country with the incredible construction of pipelines that's going on. You've heard of Energy Transfer Partners. They're the culprits that were responsible for the Dakota Access Pipeline. I've been to Standing Rock. We've worked and supported the Native communities there. We are now in Big Bend, which also has a pipeline that is from Texas into Mexico. We have organizers in Mexico working with the government there in Mexico because Mexico will sell that. Our natural gas. We won't make any money from it. It'll be the 1%, it'll be industry. And it's not going to lower our fuel costs. And besides the destruction that the pipelines produce, we are destroying our own environment by increasing our carbon footprint. So Chaco is part of a much larger campaign in this country to keep fracking and drilling out of public lands. Now, our national monuments. Look, we don't know how much worse it's going to get. Just use your imagination. And what we really are hoping to do, and what I know we have to do in the next 10 years, is that we are starting on the grassroots level. If it has to be the dog catcher, or your county commission, or your city councilor, we are working nationally, and we will be happy to share our tools with you to get every lawmaker to sign a pledge that they will not support any legislation that supports the extraction of fossil fuels. We must do this. We have no choice. We have children. We cannot look our children in the eye and say, what did you do? Just like Mariel said, when you knew that you were sacrificing your earth. And it's not an American problem. It's a worldwide problem. On the way over here, and I think it was just happened yesterday or today, there was a fracking ban in Argentina. Scotland is passing a ban on fracking. But in Pennsylvania, now you can arrest people for protesting from drilling on their own land. So things are grave. But we are not deterred. We cannot be deterred. And we cannot stop, because the progress of this movement to curb climate change and to stop the use of fossil fuels is every one of our responsibilities. We can no longer abdicate this responsibility to lawmakers. We have to hold them accountable. And if you can only do one thing, get your city councilor to sign a pledge that they will support a just transition to renewables, and they will not vote for any legislation that supports the extraction of fossil fuels. I don't know whether that answered that question, but in my community right now in Sandoval County, we got rid of Sandridge. We sent them packing, but we knew that would happen because they were on the verge of bankruptcy. But we are in the process now of looking at what regulations, what water protection rules, and now we've been joined by Bernalillo County because they said, hey, wait a minute, we get our water from the same watershed that you get your water from, so we need to be involved. So communities like Sandoval County had 16 pages of regulations against gravel. No regulations involving water. None. And this is a state which has 6 inches of rain a year. So get local. And if everybody does one thing, we will prevail. We won't fail if we're together. And that's what we need to start doing. We need to start talking to your neighbors and educating them and helping them and our lawmakers. And we are lucky here with Peter Worth. We aren't that lucky in Sandoval County. Now our county commission has been taken over by unfriendlies, and so we're in a much greater challenge. So we can work locally, we can help you, we have tools, and we'll be happy to share them. Did that answer that?
Thanks, Eleanor. We'd like to ground this next question with a quote from Lionel Watson, an Aboriginal elder and activist from Queensland, Australia. If you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. In northern New Mexico, particularly around protection of the greater Chaco area, indigenous activists and non-native community activists have been working together. There is much ahead of us to decolonize our work, and it is an ongoing process that, when honestly approached, is work that is never finished. Savior mentality is a disservice, and we can be immobilized when we don't have a decolonized framework within which to move forward. New Mexico's Story Power has spoken with some of you about this, Miya and Daniel in particular. So can you talk a little about how you know when to lead and how you know when to step back, how to interject ourselves, and how we can help one another in a truly meaningful way?
Sure. I think that quote really does resonate with me, certainly, on so many levels. And because of some of the fights that we have going on, and certainly in northern New Mexico and the greater Chaco area, it's really going to take a collective effort, because you've got state lands, private lands, Alachua lands, Navajo land, private, I said private already. But it's ultimately going to take having the support of those communities that are directly impacted, because these are the people who can really state, on the ground what the problems are. It'll help to inform some of the demands, help to inform some of the strategies that you want to incorporate into any type of campaign. And I think all too often, environmental organizations, though learning, I think try to assert themselves without fundamentally knowing what it is culturally that's different, that they have to be kind of cognizant and aware of. And I think very early on for me, when starting and trying to help, I think I was humbled very quickly, and I had to really just follow those community leaders and people who were able to help and walk me through some of the protocols and being kind of culturally aware and how to do that. I think, you can help most when you understand where it's needed most. And it's always going to be a learning process. And being a really great ally, I think, starts from just listening and learning. And I would never consider myself a leader in this campaign. But there are certain times when I feel that it's okay for me to kind of help to progress a certain project. And I take that from the people that I work with. And I think that's really how we can help each other. I think if you want to demonstrate being a good ally, it starts by listening first. And it starts by learning some of the protocols, and it starts by observing. And I think only then can we really start to help one another in a meaningful way.
I think basically the work that Tom Burkett has produced is a meaningful way to help the community. The facts, the data, the illustrations that we at the community level don't really have the technology or even the expertise at this point in time. The multitude, the maze of rules and regulations that a person has to safari through is just, every day it's a new learning experience. The rules and regulations of how the acronym APDs are approved, application for permit to drill, the unitization of the mixture of lands to signify it as, I call it a giant barrel of oil that has linear lines on the surface, but it takes in acres and volumes, cubic feet underground, and we don't know what exists there. And so in that aspect, the research that is needed on what goes on within the New Mexico Oil Conservation Division, and what goes on in the permitting of the release of methane gases, volatile organic compounds, where the compressors are in place at the well pads. Those applications go straight. Public notices in the papers, but that aspect of perusing the legal notices on a daily basis is nearly impossible. And I keep saying that the people within the New Mexico Environmental Department and the New Mexico Oil Conservation Division, it's like, here comes the paper, here comes a hearing officer. He might as well be the Pope. Bless you, my son. Continue what you are doing to kill Mother Earth. And having tread through that process, having seen engineers, geologists that don't even lay a foot on the land, that attest to what exists on that land. They don't even know there's Navajo residents nearby, or even on the parcels that they're seeking to get unitized, to get the approval for X number of wells with a 330-foot setback. And my standard protest is, Mr. Hearing Officer, all you're seeing is lines on a white sheet of paper. You don't even know the lay of the land. You don't even know where the water flows. You don't even know where the Navajo people live. You don't even know where their offering points are. You don't even know where the medicinal and the herbal plants exist. Yet you're approving them. Sight unseen. So that aspect is, and Maya and all the folks on the panel have been great support, and the allies. Sure, there's groups out there that said we don't want outsiders to come and raise heck, but on our work, we only have a certain amount of knowledge on the laws, the statutes, the rules, and the regulations. We have knowledge, the sacred knowledge, the ceremonial knowledge, the prayerful knowledge, the acknowledgement of the living things, and that part we know. And that's why we engage our allies, because their circle of influence, the amount of knowledge that they can tap into is greater than our tri-chapter alliance, our impacted communities. And certainly we've developed a good relationship, an alliance that's grown, that it's now even gone across to the 19 All Pueblo Governors Council. We have participated in a working group with them. We have working groups within our own Greater Chapter Coalition. And certainly we welcome additional support.
Thank you. So we're running out of time. I just want to ask everyone to pass their cards, their note cards with questions if they have them. We'll be collecting that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to ask the last question, which if you guys could each identify what can all of us do here in this room tomorrow to take action. Can we start with you, Eleanor? The more specific the better.
If you're digitally oriented, get your cell phone out, text 69866 and text in the word resist, and we will text you on a regular basis with further instructions. Resist. Capitals or not, 69866. We also have kicked off a national campaign called Off Fossil Fuels. It's a campaign to transition to renewables by 2035. And we are initiating this campaign starting the 13th of May with house parties all over the country. And our first initiative is going to be that pledge that I was alluding to earlier, to get your lawmakers to sign a pledge never to support any legislation that supports fossil fuels and to support a just transition. So that's what you can do today or tomorrow. 69866, text resist, RESIST.
Well, you can start tomorrow. Come to the Albuquerque People's Climate March. I know we're going to have one here in Santa Fe. But we're really wanting to have a great turnout. This is our opportunity to let everyone know that we value our world, our Mother Earth. It's going to be at Washington Middle School, so I invite you all to come to that.
I guess we basically, again, start each day with acknowledgement of Mother Earth, Father Sky, acknowledgement of the sacredness of the land, the air, the water, and the living species that also inhabit the earth. It starts with that. Starts with humility, starts with respect, and certainly we look to the future. Rebecca uses the word nas, Navajo word for forward, nasco, looking forward. Acknowledge and send respectful message to Peter Ward. He helped us get this House Memorial going, House Memorial 70. And of course, Representative Lindsay, Representative Georgine Lewis. She's quite an anonymous. She's an Acoma Pueblo woman that represents a legislative district in Albuquerque. And really, that's the part that I guess is great. And they're the ones that helped us form the alliance. And appreciate them for their alliance. Everybody wondered why I campaigned hard for Derek Lindsay. Why do you campaign for Pueblo? How come you yourself didn't run? And I says, hey, I'm doing other work, but after he got elected, the chapters of Torreon, Encino, Counselor, and Wolfeno, he won by 1,500 votes. He comes back and he says, Navajo's elected me. And one of the things that he acknowledges the fact that we established trust. So tomorrow, establish trust. His story is, we grew up, we were taught as Pueblo people not to trust the Navajos. Historically, they raided our Pueblo, stole our crops, kidnapped our women. We were taught. But in this day and age, I trust the Navajos. And so that's the big message today. The other big message is, and again from a Pueblo woman, way back, time immemorial, us brown-skinned people, we were all known as the people. We weren't different pueblos, different tribes, we were all the people. And when we as Navajos call ourselves the Ne, we are calling us the people. That's what the Ne means, our people. And so those types of things, and you are always part of the people too. Five-finger folks. Not like a monkey, but you're close in the thumb. Thank you for your attendance. I'm humbled for your attention and help us carry the resistance to fight forward.
So one of my heroines is Naomi Klein, and she talks about activist DNA. And on one of the strands of the DNA is resistance, and on the other is exposing the vision of what's possible. So we need to, and of course the DNA is intertwined, right? And it makes us. And so, so our particular work at New Energy Economy is to fight coal, and also the 100% renewable. Right now we're working with co-curated Pueblo to solarize their community center at the Pueblo, with the dream of making co-curated Pueblo the first 100% renewable Pueblo in New Mexico, in the world. So again, it's about partnerships and dream big. And so I just want to say that a number of our groups we only have till May 8th, so I'd love it if you want to sign one of these pieces of paper. It's right on that table out there. It's to close the San Juan mine. We're having the 100, so just leave it there, and we're going to send them all in together to the Office of Surface Mining, and all of our groups have been involved in getting letters to them. Then tomorrow here, you heard from Miya about the march and activist work in Albuquerque, but if you live in Santa Fe and you want to be part of the 100% renewable energy campaign launch, it's at El Museo tomorrow at 3:30. And then the last thing is the only person who's announced that she's running for governor is Michelle Lujan Grisham. So we are asking her to have, we want to drive this 100% renewable message into the governor's race. So she's the first one, and we'd love for you to sign this card, and that's what it demands. Because if we don't get to her to take some bold positions, she's going to end up like Hillary and you know, not be elected. And so we want her to take some really strong stance aligned with our values. So thank you. What can you do tomorrow to help Greater Chaco? So I'm going to throw some things at you. First, if you haven't found us on Facebook at Frack Off Chaco, we collectively organize there, so please like us there. We also have a website, frackoffchaco.org, that we are in the process perpetually of updating. I heard something last week at a training that was really interesting, that was successful political movements only require 3% of constituents to be successful. So 3% of an engaged constituency can move an issue. Just think about that. Not that many people. We've got 100-some thousand in Santa Fe, 3,000 people. 3,000 people to move the entire city. So what can you do tomorrow? New Mexico, another unfortunate stat is that we are #1 in the nation for public lands, oil and gas drilling in 2016, and now for 2017 too. So nation with the state with some of the highest solar and wind potential is #1 in giving away our public lands for fossil fuel interests, specifically oil and gas. And the Trump administration isn't making things easier, of course. So we've got some secretarial and executive orders that are all about mandating these agencies that in the past have been to protect and preserve our collective resources, but
mandating them to undo climate science, to open the door, roll out the red carpet, remove any barriers to oil and gas development that may exist within our public lands. That process is happening right now. So our one major line of defense against the Trump administration and where we can actually hold the line is in the US Senate. And we do have two senators, Senator Tom Udall, Senator Martin Heinrich, that can be doing a lot better on Chaco issues. So I'd say if there's one thing that you can do tomorrow, today, it's two things. One, make sure you've got their DC phone numbers. We want to, every time you call our representatives, call them in DC. Call them in DC and tell them where you live in New Mexico, that you're a constituent and that you care about the issue you're calling about. And ask to be put on a list to get a response from the senator on the issue that you're calling about. And then they both have offices here in Santa Fe, too. Their staffers are friendly, very friendly, and we will force our politicians to become the leaders we want them to be when we make it too uncomfortable for them not to be. And that's being respectful, that's agitating, that's constant pressure, constantly applied in every direction. I think so tomorrow. Also, if you're really data hungry, because of the lack of transparency in the Trump administration and this huge now gap in accessibility to information from our federal agencies, Wild Earth Guardians, also some other organizations have been filing a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests. We're collecting that information, we're making it public. You can see all of our FOIA requests as well as we filed our opening brief for our Chaco Mango Showcase today. So you can find all of that information on climatewest.org and Wild Earth Guardian's website too.
So in the past couple of years, there just seems to be a lot more fascination with the Four Corners area, and we've been getting a lot of journalists and photographers, camera people coming to the Four Corners recently, kind of looking around and kind of fascinated with some of the things we have. You know, the national parks, the fascinating culture with the tribal communities, the rivers. There's so many things in the Four Corners that are just remarkable. And hearing, you know, people talk and, you know, maybe when I first met Mariel in, you know, the late 2000s or whatever, and we were talking about the coal plants closing, you know, maybe that was a dream, and now that is becoming a reality. And so, transitioning the Four Corners, I think, is really an important thing right now, and it's really relevant. To have a place that's been heavily impacted by energy development, and, you know, I'm happy to show people, you know, why I think that, you know, gas processing is problematic, why hydraulic fracturing is a problem, why burning fossil fuels continues to be problematic in one of the most vulnerable places in the world, and that climate change has had an incredible impact on our communities. And now I'm hearing people in my community talk about, well, we have all these recreation opportunities, and we can bring tourism, and you know, for that to happen, we need to clean up, and we need to question authority, and observe, watchdog, engage, and be involved. And I guess that's what I, you know, see as the route forward.
So we're, of course, rapidly running out of time. We can't answer all of these questions. Helps if I turn it on. We can't quite get to all of these questions, so I think what we'll do is we'll take a couple and we will try to get the organizers up here on stage to answer them, and we'll post them on our website. Because there are some good questions here. We won't be able to get to them all. So I'm going to start with some that I think can be answered quickly. Miya, this one might be best answered by you. The question is, PBS aired something called The Crowd and the Cloud, showing how community-based science can help, or rather be used to track health, pollution, etc. Would it work in the Navajo Nation and in Chaco?
I think it could. I'm not too familiar with that, but I can kind of talk about kind of what's going on at the moment. We are working on trying to get a health impact assessment. We are wanting to be able to document some of the level of exposures to toxic emissions that people are exposed to on a daily basis. We have done some air sampling. We've also done some water testing as well to get some baseline data. Should and if there are any changes in the water. And I think these types of community-based projects are really important to be able to have some tangible documentation should and when things do change. And I think that's something that can potentially very much works in this area as well.
I just want to add something to that. I just would like you all to know that the ban on fracking in New York State was based on health impacts, solely on health impacts. Had nothing to do with the technology, and it was Governor Cuomo that said, I don't want my children living in this environment. So it is a real viable route to safety.
Okay, so one more. Who creates regulations? BLM or state legislature or the federal government?
D, all of the above. So it is nebulous. It gets a little bit complicated. So in the Greater Chaco area specifically, we've got the Bureau of Land Management, which is our nation's largest manager of our public lands, minerals, and resources. And BLM, like I had mentioned before, is the administering agency regardless of whose land it is in Greater Chaco. So when it comes to the acronym Daniel threw out was APDs, applications for permits to drill. When it comes to approving wells in the ground, the BLM is the one that does that. When it comes to new rules, so the state of New Mexico has the authority to enact legislation that for the jurisdiction of the state of New Mexico, federal government, it's the same thing. BLM just goes through its own rulemaking process. You may have heard about the BLM methane rules. And there's a spider web of wells out there, and there's also a spider web of relevant regulations. Mike earlier mentioned these bedrock national environmental laws, the National Environmental Policy Act, the strongest environmental law we have, the Endangered Species Act. What I'd say is those laws and the concentration on federally focused protection that bore out of the civil rights movement in 1960s, this spur of energy, also represents how energy was created and consumed in those past decades. So large power plant that's going to take a lot of energy and spew it out and distribute it to different places. Fracking changed the game because now fracking, oil and gas activities are across the country in people's backyards, and you can't put it behind a fence, put it 5 miles away from people and pretend it's not there. So just like that, the concentration of environmental protection is no longer rests just in federal hands either. So it's not I don't have a direct answer because it would take me an hour and a half to really talk you through all the different regulations. But we talk about Oil Conservation Division. That's the state-based agency that's charged with administrating state-based regulations for oil and gas. First and foremost, it's the federal agency, the Bureau of Land Management, that's doing those approvals. So our lawyers, we get in and we look at all the different opportunities and legal avenues we have to challenge these things, but we have to be creating new protection laws, and that comes in the connection and the defense, the demand of protection of our clean air, our clean water, and our public health. We've been talking about Chaco as an environmental justice issue, that it's not just stopping fossil fuels, it's addressing the injustices that for 50 plus years the Navajo Nation has been an energy sacrifice zone. What does that mean? And we can't outsource these health problems and these pollution points to disenfranchise low-income, people of color communities, and it's going to take all of us at every level of access of government to try to bring about that change.
Now, I would like to add something to that. It's really important to realize that fracking as a process is exempt from the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, thanks to Bush and Cheney. And so those protections don't work. Another thing to remember is that the Federal Environmental Regulatory Commission, FERC, has been rubber stamping every pipeline, and that's why we have the pipeline at Standing Rock, the Dakota Access Pipeline. And there are many different ways of getting a pipeline through. And what they did and what other pipeline companies have been doing is that they apply in segmented areas, which means that they do not have to have an environmental impact statement. And that is something that that FERC has allowed, and that's something we're fighting. FERC right now does not have a quorum. They cannot issue any permits until they have a quorum, and we have a campaign to stop any more appointees to FERC, because now they are kind of crippled at this moment, and it's just a moment that we can seize. So pipelines and fracking infrastructure right now have so many legal ways of getting around any kind of protections, and it's just the nature of FERC, and because they have been just permitting everything, and it's the same thing with other pipelines. There are pipelines that are going all across the country. Some are international, some are interstate. They are all subject. And right now, the Keystone XL pipeline is our biggest problem. We have one place to stop it, and that's Nebraska, because the commission, the county commissioners in Nebraska can vote it down, and we are putting so many resources into that one fight because we can't stop the Keystone XL.
I wish we had time for more questions, but we don't. However, we are going to take your questions and try to get them online, get them on our website, and answer as many as we can, and consult with you guys on those questions. So hopefully your questions will be answered. I can't thank you enough, all of you. Your incredible knowledge and courage is such an inspiration. And knowledge is power, and we're building it. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to SFAI. Thank you, Toni. Thank you, Robert, Franco. You guys are really leading the way with joining arts and social justice issues. So thanks again, everyone. We love you. Good night.